Hello and welcome to Mann's Model Moments. Today I'm going to be talking about 10 common beginner mistakes that can hold back your model kits from looking as good as you can make them, and how to remedy those. This isn't to have a go at people, but rather to point these things out so that you can recognise them and address them to improve your own modelling skills. We all go through this journey, and I've certainly committed all of these errors myself, something I could have avoided or at least made a shorter journey through had YouTube and these sort of videos been around when I was starting out. Now, broadly speaking, these mistakes fall into three categories. Mistakes made when dealing with the kit items, mistakes made when building the kit, and those that come when finishing our model. In general, the earlier ones are more important, as a nice finish can't cover up a more fundamental build problem. To demonstrate some of these problems, I'm going to be making the Karo-AS Fw-187 Falcke, which is a limited run, low pressure injection moulded kit. So, with that preamble aside, let's get into it, shall we? First on our list is dealing with those imperfections in the kit that come from the moulding process itself. These come in a few flavours: sink marks, as can be seen on these wheels, ejector pin marks, which are generally recessed but can also be raised, though generally not as pronounced as this, and flash, which is excess plastic on the parts which is squeezed between the two moulds. These are all unsightly and ruin the appearance of a model, so need dealing with. Positive ejector marks and flash needs removing with an appropriate tool. Sink marks and negative pin marks require filling, and then all of them will need sanding to restore a smooth finish before moving on. Many subjects feature items that are cast in solid plastic, but in reality are open structures. Gun barrels, exhausts and vents are just a few examples. Ideally, these need opening up to give a more in-scale representation of the actual item. Just take care that you don't overdo it and damage the part, or you're creating more work for yourself. Other options, of course, are to replace the item with something more in scale, such as an aftermarket item. Some of the limitations of injection moulding, especially in smaller run kits, means that some items are larger and thicker than they would be at that scale. For example, the trailing edges of wings or canopies in aircraft. Some of these things can be addressed by sanding the part to a more scale appearance, or replacing with a more in-scale item, for instance made of plasticard, or an aftermarket item. That is essentially why those markets exist, after all. The next items are probably the most common ones encountered as a beginner modeler. The first of these is the failure to adequately remove seams from parts. Seams are the areas on a part where the two moulds join, resulting in a, hopefully, small amount of excess plastic, but sometimes a large amount is shown here, or even worse, a misalignment. They're probably some of the most annoying and tiresome things to deal with in any model, but patience and careful removal will result in a good foundation to take our finish. Failure to address them immediately draws the eye and breaks our immersion in the illusion of a scale representation. Removal is generally possible with a knife and or sanding materials, but sometimes more aggressive steps may be needed with a misalignment, and again, sometimes a replacement item is a better bet. The second most common mistake is to inadequately deal with gaps on the model. As much as we may dislike it, even the best models may have areas that don't fit perfectly, requiring some measure of filling. Again, it's a tiresome process, and the sanding of the area can also result in removing detail from the model that we need to take care of to either protect or restore afterwards. But once again, patience and diligence will serve you well here. Now, even if we have a great model, we can still mess things up by being hasty. Uneven paint coming from trying to rush things with a single coat can easily do this, as can be seen in the cockpit and other hand-painted items here. It's not just hand painting that suffers from this though, as these horizontal stabilisers show. An airbrush can suffer from inconsistent and uneven paint coverage too. The solutions here again are fairly simple. First, you can use a primer to evenly cover the model before applying paint, which makes the top coat adherence and opacity better. And secondly, you should always apply multiple thin coats rather than trying to get away with a single thick coat. 2 coats is often enough, especially when applied over a primer, but what you actually need depends on your subject, the surface, and your desired end result. Another thing that differentiates great models is the crispness of their paint finishes. Messy paint jobs detract from the authenticity of the finish's result, and even if your painting on the rest of the model is good, inevitably your eye will be drawn to the mistakes. This again is not exclusive to hand painting, and the solutions depend on the subject and your preference. Paint masks, either homemade with tape or pre-cut aftermarket items, are a possibility, meaning that the accuracy of your paint finish is not limited to your skill with a brush, be it hand or air. Brush control to increase accuracy comes with time and practice and requires patience and diligence to achieve. Cut strips of Decal film can also be used to create crisp canopy framing if you don't like either of those possibilities, and at the end of the day, the choice is yours, but an absence of haste is common to all of them. The next one is something that can be committed by any modeller regardless of their skill, and that is one of unintentional inaccuracies in finish. This could be in the form of applying an incorrect colour. For example, the lower finish here on this Falcke is RLM 76 Hellblau, a colour which didn't replace the RLM 65 that this aircraft should be finished in until 1944. That might be nitpicking a little, you might think, but other details like silver paint chipping on doped fabric surfaces, exhaust staining where none should appear, and so on are surprisingly common. The answer to all of this is simple, and I mentioned it in this video above. It's research. Take some time to look at photographs of your subject and see what it actually looked like, rather than just guessing and getting it wrong. I always find this element of model making very interesting and rewarding, rather than a chore to be gone through, and almost always I find I learn a lot along the way. Silvered or yellowed decals instantly catch an observer's eye and make any finish look fake. Period markings were painted on. Modern markings can be special decals themselves, but all blend with the overall finish of the vehicle they're on. There are volumes on correcting these issues, but the two big takeaways I'd give to a beginner are surface preparation. Decals go down best on a gloss surface, as I showed in my recent video on the subject that you can check out here. The second is decal condition. No amount of surface preparation will help if your decals are either yellowed beyond redemption or fragmented as shown here. In that case, you need an alternative, either painting or new decals. The last thing on my list for today is weathering. This can either be too much or too little, and both detract from your finished product. Too little weathering makes your subject look fake and toy-like, as light doesn't interact with a small model the way it does a large aircraft. So a scaled down photo of an aircraft looks different than a model painted in exactly the same way. So we have to try to recreate that illusion of depth with weathering techniques. Heavily and poorly applied weathering has a similar effect, making the various chips and staining appear fake rather than natural. Once again, a little research goes a long way here, and when you have your goals in sight, start with small, subtle effects and work up. It's easy to apply more effects to a model, but it's hard to remove them selectively. Work with effects you can easily control to start with, like weathering powders, and if you need to know how to make some of those cheaply, check out this video here, rather than trying, for instance, airbrushed effects which can go wrong very quickly. So in conclusion, as you'll note from each of the above individual sections, there are a couple of common terms I keep using: research and patience. Rushing headlong into a modelling project is tempting, but it can ultimately be a frustrating and even infuriating experience that makes you downhearted at the end result. Take your time, do some research, learn some things along the way, and put in the time to ensure what you make is a solid foundation before you start to move on. Time spent early pays dividends later on, and that care will show in your finished model. I personally love the Fw-187 Falcke. I think it's a lovely aircraft, and making it in this way was almost painful for me, and the end result does remind me of some of my first projects when I returned to modelling. To show you just what I've been talking about in this video, and to really do justice to the Falcke, I'm going to remake this exact model, not the same kit, but this actual model I've made, do it again properly, and then compare the two. That video won't be next, as I have the lovely Airfix 148th Blenheim coming for you next week, but it will come soon. That's all for this instalment of Mann's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous, then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.